Royalty. Power to the chosen people.
Okay, today we're going to look at Zechariah, and I'm going to put on my seatbelt. Zechariah 13, chapter 13. I recommend reading the whole chapter, but we're going to deal with chapter 13, verse 4. Please read the whole book if you have time. It's a short book. You can do it in like 10 minutes if you do it on audio. YouVersion Bible is how you do that on audio. Okay, so the passage and the portion I want to look at deals with, and I'm driving so I can't read you the whole passage, but somebody is going to pick it up and they're going to read it and you'll have the context. It's dealing with putting on prophets' garments to deceive. And, when we see these words often, when we see these words in English, we formulate our own definition based upon our knowledge bank or our understanding. But it doesn't work like that in Scripture because you have to know what's being said behind it, because it gives you the contextual idea of the passage so that you know exactly what's happening, you know what to look for. Because when you're dealing with a negative, and you're dealing with edification in Scripture, it's always trying to reprove you so that you don't make these same mistakes that the ancestors made. So in this idea of putting on the prophet's garments to deceive, this word deceive is the word kahesh, and it means literally to make something lean by withholding something. So you can make a person lean with a lie because you can withhold the truth, thus making them frail or weak because they're being fed on something false, kind of like our food. The same thing then applies to spiritually. You can make something spiritually lean or malnourished by withholding spiritual truth. And so in parallel or in comparison to what we're dealing with currently in our churches and probably in some of our congregations at large, I'm not just specifically talking about Christianity, but I'm talking about Hebrew congregations as well, where the full report is being withheld. And so you have individuals wearing prophets' garments, right? The prophet, if you haven't seen the video, I go more in depth. It's called the seed, or the prophet and the seed. And the job of the prophet is to uncover or to reveal that which is hidden, right? So it also carries with this idea of making something more palatable to digest. When you are uncovering something, I have small children, and so they are learning, but they haven't perfected the idea of peeling an orange. And what you're trying to do is you're peeling the orange, for the child so that they can get to the part that's edible for them. Because they haven't yet figured out how to peel the orange without digging their fingers on the orange and tearing it apart and making it just look utterly disgusting. So what the parent does, right, is come and you peel the orange in a manner to present the edible portion to the child. Well, what the prophet preacher is supposed to be, teacher, supposed to be doing is the same thing. We'll use the concept of the orange, is to peel back that which is in general, in theory, inedible or hard to get through, so that they can get to the sweet, succulent part of the fruit so they can get the nourishment. What's happening nowadays is you have lazy prophet preachers, teachers, parents who, instead of peeling an orange or cutting an apple and giving them the edible portions, they're like, you know what, forget it, here's a bag of chips, have at it. Forget it, here's cotton candy, it's sweet, have at it. Because having fruit and vegetables takes a trained palate. I have nieces and nephews and cousins, and I know children who do not like the taste of fruit. Like, they'll eat some, but when you start getting them to, eat stuff, it's like, I would much rather have this. If you put an orange in front of them and a bag full of jelly beans in front of them, more often than not, those children will pick the jelly beans because they're children and they don't understand, proper nutrition. And that's where the prophet, preacher, teacher, parent comes in, is to explain to them that this one, while it may taste good going down, has long-lasting ramifications and will lead to leanness. While this one, this something that might be less desirable, the more you eat it, the more you will crave it, and your body will respect you and stand up and be healthy in future years because of this. The word is the same way. The word, and I'm sure you probably saw the parallel, so I don't have to go over and over again. The word is the same way. Those cotton candy, what you want to hear, whether it's Hebraic or not, is like that stuff that will cause you to be lean later. Where the word is, it starts off a little rough, and you're like, ooh, this is making me uncomfortable, and it's making me sweat. Oh my God. And over time, what begins to happen is your palate changes. The food aversion goes away, and you begin to say, okay, now I want, the word. And I know it might start off being tough on my palate, but Yah said it's sweet. So it's sweet when it goes in. And he knows that because he knows the nature of how I receive things. Okay, so that's the beginning portion. So you have this prophet who's deceiving, right? Wearing these prophet garments to deceive, to lie, to cause leanness. One of the questions that many of us have, and I deal with this a lot because I know it's important, you know it's important, we all know it's important. One of the problems we have is presenting truth. I don't care if it's conscious truth, just about historical lies or things that have been, misinterpreted or understood, not necessarily just biblically, but overall. How do you present that information to people who are lean? For all intents and purposes of this particular, think tank that we're going to have, I'm going to use the term anorexic, not bulimic, anorexic, because bulimic people eat and then they purge. They do starve at times, but mainly it's an eating and purging situation. Where anorexic is to withhold or deny something, right? Deny something that the body needs in order to create a particular image or mindset because something psychologically is not clicking. Whether it's I was big at one time and I don't ever want to be big again. Like there's these things in the brain. So for all intents and purposes, we're going to use the people that we're trying to reach. We're going to call them the anorexic people, where they are not only sick, but they are, they're not only sick, but they are lean, and they look scary, and they look like they need help. But you can see it, but that person can't. If you know anything about people with anorexia, they in their brain look perfectly fine in their frail state, and they're continually working out to lose weight because they actually feel like they're bigger than they actually are. But when we see them, we're like, oh my gosh, they need to eat. Something needs to happen, right? Immediately, that is our assessment for these people. But what happens with a person with anorexia is once they figure out that they have a problem, so you get the initial, let's look at yourself, and they explain to you their condition, which is most of the time it's psychological. When you deal with them, you can't just start off feeding them a steak. You can't just say, baby, you hungry? Here's a 12-course meal. The same exact approach must be taken to people who are consciously anorexic and spiritually anorexic. Because guess what? They look to themselves fine, right? They're like, I can finally fit these clothes I always wanted to wear. I'm finally in church. I was out in the world, and this is working out for me, okay? So I look good. And you're like, oh, okay. You have to respect where they're coming from. But at the same time, it takes a little bit of wisdom. Wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove. In order to get a person who is spiritually and consciously malnourished, nutrients, you have to do it in small doses. Just like you don't give an anorexic person a steak, you don't give a spiritually malnourished person a spiritual steak. What you get is first supplements. When a person is anorexic, you're like, okay, I need to give you something to where you don't feel full. Because the moment an anorexic person feels full, you have completely lost them, because that is their fear. The fear of their stomach being too full, and that food turning into fatness, right? The same is true for a conscious and spiritually anorexic person. When you fill them, you're going to system overload them, and they're going to go, no, I can't take it. It's going to make them sick. It's going to make them want to throw up. It's going to disrupt and disconnect everything that they have built and held to be true. You start with supplements. You start with the minerals and the nutrients that are untraceable, right? So with the anorexic person, the first thing you start with is, you know what? I know that because they don't not eat. Anorexic people just eat very little. I'm going to start with adding nutrients to whatever it is that you're comfortable eating, right? So if you're comfortable eating, let's say, or drinking a smoothie and you're not putting enough calories in it, right? Then what a person can do is say, all right, I'm just going to slip some vitamins and some proper nutrients into the smoothie. Untraceable, powder form, you don't even know they're there. They drink the smoothie, they start to feel a little bit stronger, they start to look a little better, but they're not full. They're satisfied at their level. You won that battle. Same thing with those who are consciously and spiritually anorexic. Add the minerals and nutrients to what they're already willing to accept. Don't attack what they're willing to accept. I hear so many people like, this is Jesus and Jesus this, and you ain't supposed to do this. And it's like, you're attacking their anorexia, and you're not going to be able to feed them. You're filling them, and you're making them sick. Leave the Jesus alone if that's a place where a person is uncomfortable. Because if they're willing to listen, and you get those trace minerals in, they will do their job. The trace minerals being the word, but where they're comfortable with the word. It's the milk, right? The milk. Get that in, and it'll begin to make them crave, right, that which has sustenance. Before, they just wanted the jelly beans. They're like, just give me those. And not just all the jelly beans. They were picking and choosing the jelly beans out of the I like all the red jelly beans. That's how they're treating the Bible. But what you're saying is, okay, you like jelly beans, all right? Instead of just the red ones, though, let me give you some green ones, You have to be concise. And if you don't have the tact or the wisdom to do so, leave those people alone, because there's people like me and others who would love to be patient and give them the opportunity to come to the truth at their speed and at their level. Because this is one thing that I know. When a person is malnourished, initially they don't know it. But once you begin to feed them food with nutrients, and you begin to slowly replace the negative with the positive, they'll crave the positive. They'll have a fire inside of them that will want that which is true. And that's the time where you can begin to cut up bite-sized pieces of steak and these heavier things, because now their appetite is not being satisfied with just the little bit you were giving at first. You have to be patient. It's not on your time frame. You're like, people need to get it now because it's... Yes, in Yah's time. Yah's sending those who are going to feed his sheep. They are his. And so you're trying to fatten the sheep too fast, and you're killing them. You're causing them to cleave tighter to that which is hurting them and that which is making them sick and weak, and it's hard. It's like plenty of kids, sorry, but a lot of people, like sheep, children, these are used in scripture because the mindset, even though we mature physically, our mindset doesn't, because we don't have Torah to mature us. A lot of kids still get kidnapped with the candy tactic. You would think that after all of this warning, right, that kids would not still be getting kidnapped when people saying, would you like a piece of candy? Or would you like a puppy? Like, you know what I mean? Like, those things should be beyond us, but the innate base nature is to want that which sparks our pleasure sensors. These churches are set up, and some of these camps too, which are all the same thing to me, are set up to incite the pleasure sensors. You don't have an identity, so I'm going to incite that in you. You don't have a culture, so I'm going to incite that in you. But all along, I'm still like, picking through and giving you only what I feel like you should have, instead of giving you the full dosage, but then breaking it down. Like, the minerals and nutrients and vitamins are the same as food, only Some people don't get the proper minerals, nutrients, and vitamins because they don't eat properly. So what you're starting with is a supplement, right? But what you should work toward is then eating the way that you receive those things. Those are not two different things, but eating candy and food are different. So there's different phases to going from the minute to the major, where the other, which is the candy or the popcorn or the cotton candy, is not doing any of that. It's just a filler. We have to be careful that we are not using filler, which is our own intent, our own purposes for people's lives in order to feed them. We need to find out where they are. It would be a shame to treat a anorexic person like a bulimic person. And it's a shame to treat a spiritually lean person like a spiritually fattened person, because there's two different ways to go about approaching this. And you can have a fat person who's also lean. Like, you need to know and be able to judge between these two things, because these preachers, prophets, teachers, and even parents have put on the prophet garment in order to cause spiritual leanness. And oftentimes, the people sitting in the pews do not know this. Those preachers have been mentally conditioned, and they're also sick. So as long as I'm sick and I'm anorexic, I want everybody around me to be sick and anorexic so I don't look strange. But when you have people beginning to put on the fatness of truth and begin to fill out and look good, I'm not saying be obese, but I'm saying like to look good, it makes everyone else in there look weird. If you're not gaunt in the face and your eyes are not sunken, you're like, man, that person looks like they and what are you going to do? If you're spiritually lean, you're going to attack that which has spiritualness, because you want them to turn back to how they were so they don't cause people to look at you different. You need to remember that as you're approaching this, because some of you are walking into a den of anorexic zombies who are getting ready to snub out your light. And you have to be careful when you're trying to go into this den to retrieve your family and your friends, that you don't make them spiritually fat and then leave them to the people who are going to suck it out of them. Okay? They're going to take the light from them because you didn't properly nourish them. You know, you made them fat, but you didn't nourish them. So, as we approach our families and our friends and those who we are concerned about, evaluate their condition. If you're calling yourself the person who's supposed to be gathering these people, then you need to evaluate where they are and evaluate where they need to be according to Yah's word, and seek Him. Seek whether or not they are even His. Seek whether or not they even want this, just because you have to know how to approach it. And I hope that helped a little bit. I know there was a lot. I'm like 18 minutes in. But you have to be careful, because these people are spiritually, emotionally, and consciously anorexic and lean. And they've been made that way by the prophets and preachers and teachers amongst them, as Zechariah has stated. And there is coming a time, though, of refinement. And we have to be careful that we don't mess up the process and cause a person to go deeper in their delusion by the things that we believe are important for them. We need to give them the Father's diet. We need to give them the Father's truth so that they can walk circumspect to His word and allow Him to feed them. He's the great shepherd, right? And you don't want to do anything wrong to His sheep, because you will be held accountable for what happens to those sheep if you in any wise turn them away by your personal beliefs or personal qualms about the word. Don't attack them. Feed them with Yah's diet, with Yah's word, and pray and do so always to Yah's glory. Shalom, shalom.
Royalty. Power to the chosen people.